Darren Rovell with Ben Burrows for Collect TV, and we are talking about breaking. The break of a decade is a story on our site right now about the Blez brothers breaking at Fanatics Fest. It was called by them the break of the decade, and it certainly did not turn out to be. I have brought Ben in here, our card expert, to talk about breaking in general. Let's make it simple because sometimes we are in the weeds. Describe the act of breaking and kind of what it has evolved over the years, the various choices that collectors have if they want to get into a break.
Yeah, Darren. So, I mean, breaking has been around a long time. I think a lot of people associate it with the COVID pandemic, but it's been around for, multiple decades at this point. But a very high level overview is basically you as the buyer, rather than purchasing an entire box, you purchase the rights to a piece of that box, whether it is a specific player or typically a specific team. Those are, pick your team, pick your player, or randoms, where it's just randomly assigned for a set price, are the most common breaks. And that way you could potentially buy myself, if I wanted to buy all of the Atlanta Braves of a Topps Chrome break, I could do that. Now the caveat is that if there are great Braves that come up, I'm entitled to all those cards for whatever price I paid ahead of time. If there are zero Braves that come up, then I get zero cards. And so it can be a good value proposition, especially for people that want to build their collections early on and start stacking up good cards of players that they like and teams that they like. But like we saw at the break of the decade, it is very easy to get skunked, especially on the ultra high end products where in a break, maybe you're getting access to one card and you're paying potentially thousands of dollars for that card.
And these breaking businesses, some of these guys are doing millions a month gross, but they're certainly taking advantage of the arbitrage of a, say, National Treasures box, which is a $20,000 box, and no one's ever going to go there, right? And so
Sure.
they bump it up more and more, and it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're just in a gambling society right now. Everyone's on tilt, and so it's all been normalized.
Yeah, I think again that specifically that term gambling, I think just inherently trading cards is a little bit of a gambling mechanic, right? You're opening packs, but I think box breaking takes that to an additional level. And I think the problem that a lot of people have with it is the fact that if you buy a box and you open a bunch of cards, you might not get something you like, but you don't get nothing. With a box break, it's almost a little bit like a slot machine where you could actually play the game and come away with nothing. And unfortunately, it probably has been normalized a little bit. I think you and I have talked about this. At some point, you have to think that there's going to be regulation involved, especially with the amount of money that is coming in. I've heard at least one company is doing, $100 million gross, every year. And so when you look at it that way, maybe it's a little more closer to gambling than it is just collecting cards.
Yeah, and if it is, then there's going to be tax liabilities. There's going to be rules of lottery. Obviously, when you get zero and you enter a sweepstakes, that actually does not really comply to some gambling laws. So we'll have to see what the regulations are. Let's talk a little bit about some of the tensions about breakers are getting more than the hobbyist. So obviously, like people, they go to their local store, they buy a box. There's recently been a lot of scuttlebutt over breakers delight boxes where
Sure.
the breakers not only will get something first because they're ordering multiple cases, but they also have a better product. What's the latest with that?
Yeah, well, it's been something that I think when you're a normal collector and you go online and you see all of these breakers pulling the best cards, it can get frustrating when you aren't getting that. Just today, we saw possibly one of the best cards in 2024, Topps Chrome, the LeBron James Superfractor, just got pulled by a hobby shop in Tennessee. And so it can be frustrating when you're, as a normal person, putting in a large percentage of your budget and really you don't have access to these cards as much as you think you deserve. But the reality is that these breaking companies are buying up massive percentages of these products on the secondary market. And we have heard that there are some
And
ultra high.
they have primary deals too, right? They have
Yeah,
primary deals
absolutely.
with Fanatics, let's say, or Panini, and
Yes.
then they're buying more. So then you can say, well, I don't know if it's actually a hobby box or a box that was destined for breakers, because who knows what they're buying first and who knows what they're buying second. Plus, obviously, it seems like there's a lot more sensitivity as Fanatics basically put out a audited Price Waterhouse Coopers. By the way, the fact that breakers are getting more is just a percentage play. Our boxes were audited and we're not found to give more to breakers. So, like, is that the issue, that we don't know where these guys are buying it? So we can't really believe that they're getting a better piece of the pie. How does
Yeah.
that even motivate Fanatics?
Right. It's very complicated. So the way that it actually works now under Fanatics is that hobby shops can have the allocation that they're given to sell within their hobby shop, and they actually have to have a separate allocation if they want to break. And so breaking allocation, in-store allocation are completely different, but a lot of times you see these breaking companies completely blow through their breaking or in-store allocation. You actually have to get a waiver, as far as I know, if you wanted to have those allocations cross over from one another, but then they're going on the secondary market. And I've heard about products like Flawless Basketball, for example, one company potentially buying up upwards of like 70% of the product on the secondary market. And good or bad, that's just the reality. Once you have all of the hits come out, or if they haven't come out, it seems worse for the collector because you have the initial product that comes out, the big hits don't get pulled, and then all of a sudden one company is buying the overwhelming majority of product on the secondary market. They should pull that big hit, but it doesn't make anybody feel any better. Nobody cares about the nuances of that. It just stinks. It feels bad. And when it's the same companies doing it over and over again, even though they're opening the majority of the product, it still just feels bad. And that's not why people collect, right?
So is there is there any negative from, it seems like people don't really recount when something happens, but is there any negative from, oh, I didn't get a good box, or that's just luck? I think probably the negative is the over promotional nature of it. And then $5,000, what are the ranges that people pay, by the way, to get into these breaks?
Well, it really depends. I mean, if you have an ultra high-end product like a National Treasure, so break of the decade, it was 99 spots for $5,000 a spot. And if you look at the total offering, I think it was pretty strong. And at $5,000 for 99 spots, we don't know exactly what the Blesnick brothers paid on the secondary market for all those products, but it didn't seem like they made a ton of money. It sort of seemed like they broke even on the spots versus what they paid. But it's not uncommon to pay $5,000 for a single card in one of these products when you have a National Treasures or a Flawless Basketball, or even higher than that. You have products like Eminence, where it might be $20,000 a box or 30 or $40,000 a box, and people are getting one card out of that. It may cost them 7 grand, 10 grand to get into one of
Wild.
the products. It's but
My
we're also
last question for you, Ben, is what do you make of how hard Fanatics is getting into breaking? It is the main focus of their Fanatics Live. They obviously own Tops. They have gone heavy. You could even see at Fanatics Fest the focus in the space on breakers. Is there any risk for them there? What motivates them to go so big on breaking? Is there a secondary motive in that they sell more boxes to breakers, can sell them faster, better prices? Where are you on how gung ho Fanatics is into breaking?
it's very complicated. I mean, for Fanatics right off the rip, it's very good for them to be able to get their best products in the hands of the people that are most influential. So that just makes sense. Breaking is sort of advertising for them in a way. Now you can have a little bit of blowback. It stinks if one of the product hits gets pulled early, because then that takes, some of the air out of the product. But I think more times than not, it extends the product a little bit. People are interested in it. We actually don't see the major product hits go out that often. It seems like they do, but it's really on occasion. But I think that the conversation there becomes difficult because Fanatics has talked about wanting to get more kids involved. Do we want kids involved in breaking? I'm not sure that is something that typically is aligned together, right?
I have
And
a 10-year-old son, and he wants to get into a break
yeah,
more than he wants to buy a box.
and then on the flip side of that, we look at, is there going to be government regulation stepping in at some point? Is it a smart decision for Fanatics to invest so heavily in something that I wouldn't be surprised if there's legislation in the next couple years that sort of really puts a hamper and puts a cap on breaking holistically. So how much of an investment are they willing to make? I'm so far it's been significant, but I think it's fair to question whether or not there's a long-term solution there, if it's a smart play, and whether or not it really aligns with the idea that they want to get more kids into the hobby. Is this the right way to do it? I I think it's up for debate.
Ben Burrows' story on the break of the decade is on collect.com. And Ben, thanks for joining us on Collect TV for an excellent explanation on breaking.